You know how they say that nothing unites a group of people more than a mutual dislike of somebody else? Well, that's what we're applying that logic today when it comes to washrooms, because a lot of us, whether trans or not, deeply dislike certain things about what we experience in public washrooms. And the answer to making it more comfortable for everyone could lie quite comfortably in the accommodations that are being sought for trans and non-binary people. Did I say binary then?
Maybe along those lines, but I
Trans and
kind of like
non-binary.
it. Binary.
That just felt weird in my mouth. Trans and non-binary people. I am, as always, joined by the king of washrooms, Kai Scott. Hello.
Oh, wow. Okay, royalty in the room here.
You spend so much time talking about it that you basically are.
Pretty much, yeah, I guess so. I should just take that crown and wear it proudly.
Yeah, it's yours. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, it's a beautiful sunny day. Yeah, I'm having a grand time.
So I feel like we should probably start with the fact that I feel like washrooms are one of the things that people kind of universally complain about when it comes to the public spaces. And so I wanted to start with the design features that are sort of collectively hated by everybody that you can think of.
Oh, there are so many, but we will definitely dive into a few of them here. The big one that we hear time and time again, because we do surveys, facility user surveys or listening sessions. We've done many over the years, including trans and non-binary folks, but also cisgender folks, where we actually have a good sense from across the spectrum. And time again, we hear those stupid gaps on the side of the door.
Oh my God.
Agreed. And at the bottom. What? Who came up with that?
Yeah.
And so
crazy.
Yeah, there's just a lot of mystery around that and not people feeling comfortable with that because, of course, it does compromise privacy in that people can, from the outside, look on the inside. In particular, it's especially egregious when the stall door is right across from the mirror. So somebody who is washing their hands or, sprucing themselves up can see behind them who's in the stall and even maybe a little bit of what they're doing. Maybe not everything, but certainly more than people are comfortable with. Both sides too.
When I first came to Canada, I remember being in the airport washroom and peeing and making direct eye contact with somebody in the mirror. And both of us laughed, but I was like, this is terrible. What am I doing here? This is very odd.
Questioning the sanity of this country. Well, it's really North America that specializes in these
something that we all question occasionally.
Indeed, as one should. So yeah, that's a big thing that people are really concerned about or don't feel very comfortable with. There can be other things as well, like the lighting can be poor, and as a result, it's not very clear where to go, or there could be like corners where things are a little bit too dark, right? And especially corners where you can't see around, and it just doesn't create a lot of confidence. And especially if things are really tight as well, then you have to be really close to other facility users, and we don't like generally to think about what we're doing in washrooms, and so we don't really want to get close to people in those settings for obvious reasons. So those are some of the things. One other thing I'll add into the mix before I'm sure we'll focus, but is people don't like that others can hear them. What I call auditory privacy is violated, right?
Right.
Has a little bit to do with the gaps, but
fair enough.
I think some of it is just the kind of the echo that's in washrooms that amplifies all kinds of sounds that are happening. So
sure.
No fun.
Why is it like that? that's my question. That we have. Why is it like I had a specific moment that I told you about when we were planning for this, which is like a couple of weeks ago. A little child popped their head under the bottom of the door when I was peeing, and it made me really it's a really odd, I mean, I didn't mind, it was funny, but it's a really
Right.
odd experience to have. And it's
Yeah.
so common, and it's like available and able to happen pretty much in every washroom in Canada. Like
Yeah.
it's so common. So like it's obviously intentional because it's happening
Mm,
everywhere. So
right.
why? What's the thought process?
Right? It's a bit of explain yourself, please.
Por
Whoever
favor.
made these, whichever organization decided this was the standard and then applied to
Hmm.
every other place. Um, okay, so we dug a little bit into this in terms of the history of this, and I'm no historian. I will only give you the Coles Notes versions here, and we could dig
Sure.
deeper beyond that if you're interested. But basically, especially in the past, it was very much focused on cost. So this type of
Mm.
material is really quick to be made. It's very cheap. It's pre-made so that you can assemble it really quickly. So there's like organizations and their costs that they're considering in this, and also, there's airflow that is created by having the gaps, so you don't have that mildew or that kind of condensation that builds up within the stalls. So that's one other aspect of it as well. It also is quite durable, especially for high traffic environments, and that's where you see this as like in larger institutions, like
Hmm.
big arts venues or sports venues or big offices. These are typically these why they're installed is to kind of be able to not buckle under all that tremendous traffic. So
Hmm.
those are some of the things. And then I think from the people who designed them perspective, not the user experience, from the designer perspective, they think, well, okay, this is a way of being able to quickly check if somebody is in the washroom in the way that the child did. I think
Right.
with adults, maybe they're not as like obvious about it, like sticking their entire head, but the idea being you can check if there's feet,
Hmm.
underneath. There's also this idea of liability, where if somebody collapses in the stall, that you can be able to see if somebody has done so and then be able to offer help, right? Um,
Hmm.
so those are some of the design considerations that have been, part of the history of it. But I would say those things are shifting now to consider and incorporate the user experience, which
Hmm.
is
Thank
way
God.
more focused on privacy. Thank goodness.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's fair. So obviously these things can affect and do affect everybody, but there are certain washroom features that can affect trans and non-binary people
Mm,
maybe more intensely. And I was
yep.
wondering if you could talk about that and the sort of considerations that trans people are having to take into account with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a few dimensions that some folks may not be aware of in terms of how trans and non-binary folks use the washroom or toilets, in some cases also urinals. And
Hmm.
essentially, based on the bodies or the genitalia we have, we can be using them in different ways than is expected for that particular gender. And that
Hmm.
can show up in sitting or standing to relieve oneself. So that is a dynamic that if you're in a women's washroom, most people would not expect to see somebody standing to pee, as an example.
Mm.
It's not to say that everybody does that, but some people still do that, and that's their prerogative. But if you have gaps in those doors, people can notice that, especially at a quick glance, and then be like, "Wait a second," and it be disconcerting to them, or baffling, or some
Hmm.
reaction to that person using it in a different way. Now, with sitting to pee, it's a little bit different, right? Because all genders do those things, um, but the standing to pee can be kind of an outlier. There's another
Mm.
another aspect to using washrooms where people might have gender affirming equipment. In particular, there are some people choose to use what are called packers. So those are kind of prosthetics that create a bulge in the genital area, and that is affirming for many folks who don't have
Hmm.
that, physically. However, some of them are free floating, and so they can get away from you, and that it could drop right in the
Mm,
washroom, and that is a very common thread among transmasculine folks, and so that is a really difficult experience to navigate, and so
mhm,
that's again where those gaps present a particular and
mhm.
unique situation and challenge for folks.
I think people also underestimate how much like mental energy goes into navigating public washrooms when you're trans or non-binary. And
Mm,
so I was going to ask you about what trans and non-binary people are kind of calculating or managing that others may not have noticed, sort of
mm.
in in line with what you just said.
Right, yeah, absolutely. So there is, mm, it's kind of hard to explain because for many people they go into the washroom, they do their business and they leave. It's like
Mm,
no big deal. But
right.
for some trans and non-binary folks, depending on how they look, if it's not based on societal expectations, they can get a lot of stares, comments, questions, staff called on them, right?
Hmm.
So it's really difficult to navigate these types of interactions when you're just trying to do your business, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
there's a whole number of factors if there's what washrooms or art types are available or not available that can complicate that. But that's where additional privacy is so important, where it's you can kind of be able to get out of that very suspicious gaze that can be
Mm,
quite ever present for folks. And so that's a lot of why privacy is such an important thing for so many trans and non-binary folks, and how they want to be able to navigate these spaces really quickly to get in and out and hopefully don't raise any ire of anybody around them.
I would maybe ask a second part to that, which is that
Yeah.
what measures are trans and non-binary people taking to combat
Mhm.
those um, instances or
Mhm.
that discomfort?
Yeah. Those challenges that can be present.
Hmm.
I mean, there's so many different strategies that people employ, but the kind of
Hmm.
three most common ones are they'll try to find a single unit washroom because then there's no issues, right?
Hmm.
Um, they're free to go in there and just be by themselves
Hmm.
without that gaze that I was talking about. Two is just like suffer through whatever might come up. But you're right, that takes so much emotional labor to
Hmm.
be kind of on the lookout, but not look at them too much. Like it's this
Hmm.
real odd balancing act. And then how to respond if somebody does raise an issue, how to how to do that graciously, but maybe you're tired and maybe it doesn't quite come out the right way that you wanted it to, and always kind of treat it suspiciously. Like that does
Hmm.
not do well for for mental health over the long
Hmm.
term, to be treated with that kind of suspicion when
Hmm.
you're just a human being, right? With
Hmm.
particular needs in this case, right? The other one, and this is actually the most common one, is people avoid washrooms altogether. They just don't use them, which is really hard. Like if you go
Hmm.
a whole day, if you're in the office or out and about doing chores, like that's actually a big stretch.
Hmm.
For some, they don't eat or drink to be able to manage it to get back home. Um, you know, or for some, sometimes people like pee themselves, right? Like this
Hmm.
is the level that we're talking about. And that probably hopefully sheds light on the degree to which people are trying to avoid those challenges in those washroom
Hmm.
spaces. And the last thing is just that people, when you hold in urine in that way, many people develop urinary tract infections as well.
Hmm.
So it's pretty high percentage that, because of that strategy, have health consequences.
We've just spoken about what trans and non-binary people do to make their
Mm,
experience more comfortable and more manageable. And
mhm,
again, they're not the only people that experience this discomfort, and they're not the only
mm.
people who come up with solutions to make their experience more comfortable. And so I was wondering what you've seen maybe through your work that
Oh, right.
people
Yeah.
do to
Huh.
make it more manageable for themselves.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, I pay special attention to things in the washroom now that I'm washroom
It's
king.
washroom king. Yeah, exactly.
Just go into my kingdom and survey the lands. Um, no, I mean, I've seen all kinds of really interesting things. One of them I thought was really creative, and basically I showed up. I think it was at a bank in the men's washroom, and somebody had put the length of the door right by the gap a piece of toilet paper that covered up that gap, and I was like, oh, that's really creative. Obviously, not a long term solution because we don't
No.
want to kill a bunch of trees to create our privacy long term. But I was like, this tells me this is more of a universal issue, and people are trying to
Mhm.
figure out ways to help them be able to use the washroom comfortably and in privacy. And this is how they do it. They need this
Mhm.
in order to be able to do what they need to do in washrooms. So these are some of the ways that um, because of how it was designed without the user in mind, the user is taking control of the situation to be
Mm.
able to get through it. Others hang their coats in front of it. Maybe there's like a bag that they can hang on the hook that will also cover
Mhm.
the gap. There's all kinds of different ways, but essentially they want the gap covered.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, please. Can we just do that?
Yeah.
When organizations are thinking about implementing certain changes to make spaces more comfortable for trans and non-binary people, sometimes I think, well, from what I've seen, there can be this idea that it's very complicated. And so I was
Mm,
wondering what solutions that you generally think about or discuss with clients
yeah.
when they're
Oh,
creating those spaces.
oh, yeah. You're right. It isn't just kind of one thing, and there is the misunderstanding sometimes that it has to be this like long drawn out process, and you have to like
Hmm.
totally renovate the whole washroom and gut it
Hmm.
and start over. That might be the case sometimes. Not saying that never happens, um, but for those organizations where cost is a consideration, there are ways to update certain washrooms. An example of that is having like a flap that you can add to the gaps
Hmm.
to kind of cover them up. Right, those are pretty quick to
Right.
install. They're pretty cheap, on Amazon or Home Depot or whatnot,
Hmm.
and those are great. So if you're not thinking of changing the men's or the women's washroom into anything else, and you just want more privacy in there, that would benefit everybody. Great solution. Now,
Hmm.
if you're wanting to go and renovate a washroom to be all gender or for any gender, then there is a little bit more that needs to be done to create fully self-contained washrooms. Now, that can be done to different levels. You can still use the material that we currently, I think it's called phenolic panel, if I'm
Hmm.
pronouncing that correctly, and but with fewer gaps or no gaps,
Hmm.
right? Or just a small gap at the bottom to see if anybody's fallen. Like those are still pretty useful. It's like a 2-inch gap. It's not that big.
Hmm.
That does require, taking out things and redoing them. One other thing that we've talked about in another episode, so won't go into it much further, is removing the wall between men's and women's to create an
Hmm.
entire all gender multi stall. I only mention it because it's a spectrum, so you can do these kind of modest adaptations to kind of more fulsome, depending on what the organizational budget is,
Hmm.
and what the building can do too. But those are just some of
Right.
the things that can be done.
Do you think that conversations about trans inclusive washrooms or
Mm.
everybody inclusive washrooms designs can help us rethink public spaces more broadly? So rather than thinking of them as special accommodations, but
Mm.
maybe reframing that as opportunities to make everyday experiences more comfortable and usable for everybody.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I think that's the direction that things are headed kind of architecturally anyways, is to incorporate the user experience more. And,
Right.
all the top architectural firms, HCMA being a really good example of that, where there's extensive facility user experience surveys both before and after, and to better understand how people navigate the spaces and how to make them better. And of course, it's driven by people of particular or specific needs that are currently under or unmet, trans and non-binary folks being one of that group, but there's also people with disabilities that have dire needs that are totally not being met right now. And so those are driving these needs, but once they're installed, people are like, oh, actually I really like this, and maybe they can't even put their finger on why. It's just kind of so
Right.
subtly amazing that they're celebrating, and we've seen that in recent patron uh, interviews and focus groups that we did at a local the community center that installed all gender multi-stall washrooms. And people at first were hesitant, and then they experienced them like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. They were so excited. They're like, I
Right.
feel like
Yeah.
I'm at Holt Renfrew, at some posh place. I was like, okay. Just because it was well lit, fully self-contained, but had like nice frosted glass, it just had a vibe, a really positive vibe to it. And they didn't expect it because we're used to kind of shabby conditions in washrooms. It's, I think, really important for organizations that are considering these changes to think about all the various needs. Obviously we're focused on trans and non-binary folks, but these are generally changes that everybody, since we have a shared trauma around gaps in washrooms,
Right.
we can solve that and make it better for everybody.
Cool. Thank you so much, Kai, as always.
Yeah, thank you too. Awesome. Well, bye for now.
See you. Bye-bye.